I'm Steve Brule with Studio Brule, and I'm here with the Liberty Bells, four ladies, three of them with us today from London, England, discussing contemporary issues in culture and our particular culture or moment in which freedom of speech is at risk. And we have a story we're starting with Elizabeth here on a proposal for grants to sexual assault survivors at universities. Can you tell us what that's about, Elizabeth?
Sure, I'll read from the article. So it says, in October of last year, Universities UK, an organisation that shapes higher education policy by engaging policymakers and other stakeholders, published a set of recommendations for universities on sexual harassment and misconduct. So it left the last report, the Zellick report, a document that absolved universities of all responsibility concerning sexual misconduct in disrepute. Zellick had advised higher education institutions that the criminal justice system was best placed to support their students. This despite the fact that the criminal justice system consistently fails survivors, as is widely known and reflected in low reporting statistics to the police. So, I mean, this is the whole sort of feminist myth that, you know, if you've got low crime rates or low reporting rates for rape, that's a problem.
Bizarre take on things, isn't it?
Yeah, the rates
One
go
would
down
think
and
you celebrate low rape reports.
Yeah. So I've just had a look at this Universities UK report, and it's called the Report of the Universities UK Task Force Examining Violence Against Women, Harassment and Hate Crime Affecting University Students. Their evidence they've got from NUS survey findings, which are very scientific, I assure you. Not. But I mean, one of the interesting things I noticed was that it said in the report, harassment under the Equality Act 2010 is unwanted behaviour which makes a person feel offended, intimidated or humiliated. It's unlawful in civil law if it occurs because of or connected to one of the following characteristics. So you've got age, disability, gender reassignment, race, religion or belief, sex, sexual orientation, marriage and civil partnership or pregnancy. So presumably all the sort of feminist things that they come out with against white men are actually illegal under the Equality Act. Because, you know, you're going to make men, white men, and people who love white men feel offended and humiliated, certainly with, you know, kill all white men and all this kind of stuff that they come out with. And another interesting sort of thing I noticed in there was that these cases, you know, like harassment, for example, is a civil matter. And so in criminal courts, people have to be proved guilty beyond reasonable doubt. But in civil courts, they're found guilty on a balance of probabilities. So you're looking at, you know, an assault on due process here. They've also, yeah?
Oh, sorry, no, carry on. I'll come in when you're finished.
Okay. Actually, I'll leave that till later because that's going to segue into what Paul is talking about. But I mean, they've got sort of a lot of case studies in there, which they're taking sort of advice from what universities are already doing and saying that all universities should be doing it. And so they want a lot of campaigns against sexual assault and so on and so forth, hate crimes. And they want training for staff and student volunteers, more consent classes. And they've got this big, massive, long chapter on encouraging bystander intervention or encouraging active bystanders, which means encouraging students and staff to step in and tell people that that behaviour is not appropriate when they see it. And, you know, this is not just stopping kind of, you know, real sexual assault and real intimidating behaviour. it's actually aimed at quite innocuous things. And they've mentioned that schools have come under increased scrutiny, and they talk about a Women Inequalities Committee finding from 2016 that sexual harassment and abuse of girls at school is being accepted as part of daily life. There was also a recognition that for lad culture to be tackled successfully at universities, the government needs to take more action to address this kind of behaviour in schools. So that's the kind of takeaway from that report, that, you know, lad culture is bad, and men being men is very, very bad, and we must stop it. So that's kind of going to link to what Paula's going to talk about in a minute. But this article, going back to this, they've hailed the Universities UK report, and they've hailed Cambridge University, whose new sexual harassment and misconduct procedure is among the most progressive in the country. And they received a generous grant from the Higher Education Funding Council for England for that. The grant will be used to tackle sexual misconduct, with funding being directed to existing initiatives on campus, from their consent workshops to the new sexual assault advisor role, which will form part of the university counselling service. So another job for a feminist. Excellent. However, the writer of this article is not happy. She wants for survivors of sexual assault to be given an extenuating circumstances kind of thing in their exams, which basically means they get marked up. It's like,
and nobody will of course abuse that, right?
Right. Exactly.
You know, this is off-topic comment here, Elizabeth, but you have the quintessential British deadpan cynical humor that you have to be from the outside knowing. You have to know a little bit about when a British person is being deadpan cynical.
Yeah.
But you pull that off in
I like
like
it.
stereotypical British way very well. I like it.
Yeah. She's the straight woman.
A straight woman,
Oh,
yeah. No pun intended.
Hey, that's a hate crime or something. That's a hate crime, Paula. You're talking
I
about my
know,
sexual
sorry.
orientation. I'm offended.
Did I
and
miss sexualizing your gender? Did you do?
Well, you know, while you were reading that, Elizabeth, I remembered back in 2013, I think it was, when Janice was giving a lecture on rape culture and whatnot at the universities here. And I looked into at the time, there was this hysterical outcry on the campus about how Queen's University was the rape capital of Canada, and Kingston was the rape capital of Canada. So I was writing up something on this, and I did post something on it. And it turns out that in the previous 10 years, there were 2 rapes in the city in 10 years. And in those same 10, and that's in the city, and none of them involved students or were on campus. And there was not 1 rape on campus in 10 years. And that's the rape capital of Canada.
Fantastic.
Now, of course,
Great news.
that doesn't mean we shouldn't spend hundreds of millions of dollars to tackle this crisis.
Absolutely. And of course, it doesn't mean that the fact that men might tell a dirty joke is not going to directly lead to women being harmed in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think
Paula, did you want me to post that link you sent?
yeah, because Elizabeth mentioned the report coming from the was it the Women Inequalities Committee, Elizabeth, about women, girls having sexual harassment as just part of their lives every day. That was something I looked at. Well, when it came out, and I looked into the sources, and actually their own sources don't. the findings don't kind of match their recommendations, in the sense that the bullying in that report, if they'd actually looked at their own sources properly, shows that most of the bullying is coming, most of the sexual harassment is coming from other girls. It's slut shaming.
Yeah.
So yeah, and the fact that even though I published this on you know, the internet and on my blog, and the fact that it's actually been used as a stepping stone onto this new report now, even though is a bit worrying. But I looked into this because I've been looking into basically this kind of this Universities UK report is kind of segued into a kind of a bit of research I've been doing about kind of an attack on lad culture or laddism in universities. Now, the report supposedly about examining violence against women, harassment and hate crime affecting university students. And all of these things seem to kind of coalesce on laddism. And I put some links there, if you can put them in the just below in the chat. Just basically showing that there's kind of a perfect storm kind of developing, coming from lots of different areas in the NU, and it kind of driven by the National Union of Students in the UK. Basically, they want to take on lad culture, and it's something that they define as, let me just say, the NUS has defined lad culture as, I think, did you read this out, Elizabeth, as a group or pack mentality residing in activities such as sport, heavy alcohol consumption, banter, and was sexist, misogynistic or homophobic. Now, I did the same thing with this report, the Universities UK report, that I did with the report coming out of the Women and Equalities report, and I looked into their sources. And actually, when you look into this report, the NUS changes its language from the NUS has defined, and it turns it into the NUS has found that lad culture is a pack mentality. They also, inside the report, the Universities UK task force, I've put a link there as well with all the people who are part of that task force, they have to admit a couple of times in the report that there are no links, no objective, no empirical, no links at all between lad culture and prevalence of sexual harassment on campus. They
Paula,
actually
I
have
only
to say
see
that.
one link in the chat here. You mentioned you
Oh,
got
no,
links.
yeah, I've emailed you the other links.
Oh,
So they'll be in Google.
okay. I'll get them up after the live stream is over then.
Yeah. And basically what they're doing is that, so they're attacking lad culture, even though there's no evidence. They have to admit in the report that there's no evidence it's linked to sexual harassment. They just don't like it. And they're also attacking what something that Elizabeth mentioned, which is the Zellick report, which was in the 90s, and it was a recommendation for universities to basically direct serious criminal offences to the police, to the Crown Prosecution Service. Now, we've all seen what's happened in the States about that with Title 9? And I think the feminists over here have been looking at that and are really, really wanting for that kind of implementation to happen here. Now, they're calling it a watershed moment. I think in that article it says this represented a watershed moment in the effort to tackle sexual misconduct in the sector. It left the Zellick report in disrepute. The report, if you read it, does nothing of the sort. They also say the document, the Zellick report, absolved universities of all responsibility concerning sexual misconduct. They didn't do that at all. They simply said, if it's a serious criminal offence, have serious, the police deal with it. They also said in the report, despite the fact that the criminal justice system consistently fails survivors, as is widely known and reflected in low reporting statistics to the police. That's another lie. That's a really old lie that feminists are constantly using. It's one of the reasons why I stopped being a feminist. Rape victims are not let down by the British justice system by They're not. The rape prosecution statistics are on a par with other crimes, and they're prosecuted in incommensurable numbers as well. The fact that feminists lie about this, and in the same breath say that they're worried about low reporting statistics, which their lies actually contribute to that, I think, well, it just reveals the lie, basically, about what feminists and the kind of feminist gravy train is all about. But yeah, also in the university's UK report, and if you follow the links all in there from, they mention the Title IX interventions, and they say, in the US, there's been considerable volume of work focusing primarily on university responses to sexual assault. It's worth noting that the legal context is very different in the US, where universities possess greater investigatory powers under Title IX. Nonetheless, there appears to be scope in the UK to draw upon the US experience to enhance university responses. The funny thing is, one of the major kind of correlates that were found, even though lad culture wasn't a correlate with sexual harassment or any kind of harassment, alcohol was found to be a major contributor. In fact, the alcohol kind of drinking culture in universities.
Yeah.
But the NUS actually said in the report, I think it was in LSE report, that they didn't see drinking culture as a priority for them over and above lad culture, which again just shows
it's the same thing that
attacking men, of course. I wanted to just mention one thing that come up with, and this is what you touched on there, is the feminist changing a single word like this that changes the entire result of that study and misrepresents it by changing that one word. And this is one of the crafty, deceitful things that feminists do all across everything. The word you said was that they found instead of what was the original word? They defined
lad culture,
right?
And then they on a kind of policy document that they've got, they put the findings were our findings. It's not a finding; it's an opinion.
It's an opinion. In fact, it's a claim that lad culture. It's not a finding. They're claiming that this is being done. Now, I just wanted to mention one more thing before I go off here, because we're seeing this increasingly in Canada here in the mainstream media. We have CBC, which is your BBC, basically, here in Canada. It's a Canadian Broadcast Corporation, and they put out a article and I think a news story just last week saying toxic masculinity may be quadrupling the suicide rate for Canadian men. This is the headline, and the whole article is giving you the impression, and they quote this, the Mask You Live In propaganda movie. They then go and quote these studies. So Janice I forwarded this to Janice, and she had a look at the studies, and we're doing a Femengo file on this. The studies actually say the opposite of what the news is reporting. Literally, the news is actually quoting the study and then ignoring the study results and putting in toxic masculinity as the reason for it. This is what's going on in the mainstream news, and the reason is it's the same thing that you just quoted there, Paula. They're changing the results so that the results reflect what they want to impose upon society, what they want the world to believe. And of course, right now in the West, this idea of toxic masculinity has become is becoming a bigger and bigger topic. They want to claim that all men have to look inside and be self-critical and withdraw anything masculine about yourself because we're guilty. And so the mainstream media, of course, which is populated 99% by radical feminists, are lying to us day in, day out, and they're lying to us on tax dollars to the tune of in excess of $3 billion spent on that organization to lie to us.
Well, exactly. I mean, this fund this fund that's going to Oxford University, 90 grand of taxpayers' money, is basically just going to for implicit bias training, which is something that's completely falsified and utter rubbish, and it's just a ridiculous state of affairs
as well, isn't it?
When I hear all this stuff, it just makes me think about how insulted I feel as a woman that the feminists that are creating these projects and these organizations, they think that we can't handle anyone acting in, having banter or doing what they think is lad culture, or flirting, drinking, whatever it is that lad culture is.
Yeah, well, and the girl, I think in the reports as well, I think half of the amount of, men are sexually harassed by drunk women.
Oh, wait. Oh my gosh.
But it's, the whole point about sports groups is that they're competitive, and that, they kind of channel that kind of part of masculinity in a healthy, outlet in sport. What are they going to do when you take that away from them, when they have to sit, men have to sit with their legs crossed on the underground and on the bus. They can't get drunk. They can't, sing rude songs at a rugby club. Just, if you don't like that kind of culture, stay out of the bar.
This is not going to work on men. Okay, I'll say that right away. The absolute any attempt to sort of squash masculinity is just going to make it come out in a more exaggerated manner, in probably a less healthy manner. What we need to do here is recognize that there are elements of men that's different than women. This is
exactly. Rather than trying
the defective one.
Well, no one talks about how who are these women that cannot handle a little bit of banter from some lads. They
are
who are
like upper and middle class women, because working class women give as good as they get, and they enjoy it and they engage with it. When I was younger, I was a total ladette, so this sort of
me too.
culture is that's my culture.
Yeah.
Look, and I live in Newcastle. I live in Newcastle, which is a notorious drinking town. And all of the posh girls come up here, all the yars, and they come to university, and they come here because of the drinking culture. It's probably like spring break over in the States or something, but it's like that every night in town. And people are really famous. People are really famous because we're all kind of Celts and Norse, and everybody's famous for kind of going out in the cold with no coats on and t-shirts. Although I don't think it gets as cold as it does in Canada. But yeah, people come to Newcastle because I think there are more pubs here per square mile than anywhere.
And all the posh girls want a bit of a rough Newcastle.
Yeah, they do.
To get off, go home tonight, after having a bit of banter.
Yeah. I can't get over this idea that's being promoted that somehow women are, or even should be, these daisy fragile wallflowers. When I grew up we all went to grade school. Come on. You remember what young girls were like with grade school? They thought nothing of going up and grabbing a guy by the crotch. Okay. At 14 years old, they do that kind of stuff. Somehow between 14 years old and 19 years old, they've magically become more fragile.
Yeah.
I'd much rather spend the time with a bunch of teenage lads than teenage girls. Yeah. I'm much safer with them. Anyway, go on.
It's like the sort of 60s never happened though. You've got Camille Paglia, who talks about when in the 60s, and girls had a curfew and boys didn't. They sort of led a campaign to get this curfew lifted, you know, and all of the authorities said, oh, no, you can't. The world's not safe for you. You'll be raped. And they said, you know, the price of freedom is risking rape.
Risk.
And they wanted to join in with the boys, and they wanted to get with the freedom. And now it's like
they can't handle it.
There was a book came out years ago called Running with the Wolves. Do any of you know that book, Running with the Wolves?
I've heard of it.
No.
I think we have to say that the feminists want women to hide with the sheep. You know, I mean, I would rather saying, okay, ladies, look for your inner wolf and run with the wolves, man. You'll have a better, funner life.
Yeah. Yeah, but they want to, you know, castrate the wolves as well.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which means that, you know,
we're moving along quite a lot here. Is there? I want to make sure we get the chance to talk on some of these other topics we mentioned here.
Yeah, let's move on to the next one. What's next?
Well, did we finish with the lad culture thing, or are you there, or yeah?
Yeah. I mean, I'm continuing to kind of like gather all the data on it, and I'm going to write something up at some point. But it goes really, really kind of deep. There's just money being thrown at it from all kinds of quarters. It's and official money, you know, kind of MPs. It's a complete waste of money, and really quite sexist as well. But yeah, I'll keep an eye on it.
I just want to add, this weekend is the Male Psychology Conference in London, and they are probably most definitely going to be talking about toxic masculinity and lad culture and how it's represented, and issues such as this.
Yeah.
So if anyone's in London and
if Martin Daubney, is that how you pronounce his name?
Yeah.
If he's there, because I mean, the whole kind of lad thing kind of really first started, didn't it, in the 90s with Loaded magazine, and it was all your fault, Martin. And,
the original lad.
And I was a ladette, but I was also a feminist. Who was I didn't have a clue about my own sexuality, so I was kind of intimidated by male sexuality and kind of absolute prime prey for kind of feminists and that kind of fear rhetoric and stuff like that. But hopefully kind of he'll have something to say about it as well.
So Elizabeth, you wanted to touch up on Father's Day, right?
Yeah, we've just had Father's Day here. We had Father's Day on the 18th, which was Sunday. And I posted on Facebook, I said, you know, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And, you know, I'm really sorry to the dads who sort of aren't with their kids today. I hope you find a way to get through the day. And I also said that, you know, to anyone who's planning on wishing single mothers a happy Father's Day, get bent, because fathers are irreplaceable. And this got me in trouble with a lot of friends on Facebook. But, you know, I think me and Natty have had a conversation about it, and we kind of feel the same. My kind of feelings on it are that, you know, most single mothers, with exceptions, shouldn't be receiving praise on Father's Day. They should actually be apologizing to their children, because the likelihood is that at some point they've made a really bad decision and either had a kid with a man who wasn't going to be around and being a father, or, you know, actually getting the father out of their child's life.
Can I just say, as an orphan, you know, sometimes dads die.
Yeah, exactly.
My dad died.
That would be one of the cases in which there are no apologies necessary, which was a point I made in the conversation. But, you know, I was told that I was small-minded for thinking that being a father have a penis.
Oh, brother. You gotta be kidding.
I could just jump in there. I actually grew up from the age of 9. I was a single dad, right? And I've made this point a few times. I don't think he would have ever tried to co-opt Mother's Day and pat himself on the back and say, look at me, I'm being a mother and a father to my daughter. How wonderful am I? Everyone should congratulate me. He would never, ever dream of saying that. And I'm going to just say, put it out there. I don't think I've ever come across a man that would think that's okay, but I've come across numerous women that think it's okay in the opposite. And
I don't think that idea would ever occur to a guy. You know, the idea that because you're a single father, you should be celebrated on Mother's Day. That would have been so far out of left field that I can't imagine a guy who would even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, my dad, I think he actually had a lot of guilt with everything that happened with my parents and my childhood. He wouldn't dream of trying to turn it into a victim narrative. It wouldn't occur to him. And to be honest, he likes to play the victim in many, many other ways in his life. But that is something, so he's not perfect at all. What I'm saying is that that's where he draws the line. Yet with countless single mothers I've seen online, in fact, I would say I've sifted my Facebook for people that would probably be very supportive of that quite effectively. But there is one person who surprisingly, although not surprisingly, did sort of say that she was patting herself on the back about it, and I had a bit of a back and forth with her. And in the end, she kind of relented, because I just said to her, I said, it's just disrespectful. It's just disrespectful to all the fathers that are in children's lives. Why don't you just say, happy Father's Day to all the good fathers out there. My kid's father's not around or whatever, but don't try and take away from him. It's, this culture of taking away from men that feminists have made it more acceptable. There's an aspect with women, I think, that it's just more amenable for everyone to think that it's acceptable for them to act like that. And I recognize it in myself sometimes. So, it disappoints me.
There was one comment on Facebook. I heard somebody say that feminists are trying to make Father's Day Mother's Day Part 2.
Yeah.
Well, they're not. Yeah. Well, they're not going to get away with that, are they? Silly bints.
No. Anyway, that happens every year. We have to mention it, don't we?
Yeah.
It just doesn't go away. Much like earlier when I was watching the Queen's speech. So today we had the Queen's speech in the UK, which is the reopening of Parliament after the election, and she mentioned halfway through one of the policies that Theresa May's government wants to concentrate on is the gender gap.
Gender pay gap.
Gender pay gap. Sorry, that's just not another feminist inspired and promoted issue that just won't die.
A lie. You mean, to be specific, there is a feminist bald-faced lie.
Lie, yeah.
Uh-huh.
A lie that won't die.
I like that. Let's turn that into somebody out there start a hashtag out, the lie that won't die.
Lie that won't die.
You also mentioned Theresa May's domestic violence bill, which we've mentioned before, but I think we'll wait until there's more information about that to speak about it on this hangout, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth, you wanted to talk about a book by Bob Lewis, The Feminist Lie, speaking of lies that won't die.
Right, yeah. So the feminist lie.
That's all feminism, basically, right? The lie that won't die. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, I've just finished it, and it's an excellent book. It's got, I think the first chapter even goes into Gloria Steinem's history quite deeply, and talks about how the Red Stockings actually uncovered all of her links to the CIA and tried to publish them in a book. and she used her kind of financial and political might to squash it. So the book was released without that chapter in, which, you know, is so deeply unethical. And it was probably the most surprising part of the book for me, because I found myself rooting for the Red Stockings, who are radical feminists, to anyone who doesn't know. About domestic violence, he talks about sort of sexual revolution, all kinds of stuff, a lot about the Duluth model, and cites some really interesting studies which kind of lead you on a path of discovery into sort of, well, I've got to find out more about this and this and this. And I actually interviewed him last night, so I'm going to write that up into an article for Anti-Feminist Praxis, which should come out in the next kind of week or so. But he's a really interesting guy. He's got a really interesting history. He's been a paralegal in kind of family courts for like 15 years. And he talks a lot about how they are just completely infested with feminists, you know, and so the laws and the administration of the laws is just totally biased against men. And he's also mentions in his book at the very end his difficulties in obtaining custody of his kids who were being abused in the home with their mother and her boyfriend, which is terribly sad. And yeah, that's
Here
about
in
it.
Canada, we have a term for family court, an informal term. We call it mother's court.
Uh-huh.
It's a little more accurate.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can use my own personal experience here. As I mentioned earlier, my dad won full custody of me. He didn't make any claims for child support from her, and the social services didn't encourage him to do that either. So she, from the age of 9 years old, she's never paid a penny in the official way. Well, actually, not really in an official way, in any way, apart from, like, you know, she would buy me things, presents and things. But and I just can't imagine that if it was the other way around, that people would let my dad get away with it with not paying anything.
Yeah, well,
No.
hang on a minute.
In fact, here in Canada, I know several cases of guys who have shared custody, 50-50, and they're still paying full child support to the mother. And there's cases in which the child chooses to go, and I lived with a guy actually years ago who was in a situation like this. Eventually, when the child turns 12 or 13, they can choose the household here to some degree, as long as they're mature enough. Mm-hmm. And went to live with the father, and he still had full time, and he still had to pay child support to the mother.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, I thought, because my never actually put my dad on the birth certificate, because had she have, it would have chased him down for child support money. Sort of, in these cases, it automatically happened, whether or not the parent petitioned for it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Well, I have no idea what the deal would have been with my case, but I'm just...
Yeah. I'll just say there are, you know, I think my stepdad, I've got a half brother, and he wasn't a very savoury character, and he would kind of disappear and stuff like that, and he used to go by numerous kind of different names as well. So the child support, he used to have children all over the place, but so the child support agency couldn't find him. You know, just to give a reasoned, you know, balanced.
Well, there are definitely abuses on both sides of the law.
Yeah.
I just don't think there's any kind of means to address the abuses again that the mothers commit, or no will to address those abuses, I should say, at least not in Canada. If we're getting on quite late here, I just want to make sure we have a chance to talk about the Philip Davies article. I think, Natoya, you wanted to talk about that Philip Davies article
I
on.
wanted to mention that Philip Davies is back in Heat Street. So if you guys weren't aware, before the election was called, he was writing one article per week on Heat Street, and he wrote about us in one of them as well, maybe like a month or so ago. So let me just read my favorite quote from the article. Okay, so the title of the article is "How I Took on the Politically Correct Brigade and Won." So he says, I managed to change policies with the Women's Equality Party, and the second and most satisfying policy I managed to change was the issue of women's equality and rights. Before the election, someone had emailed the Women's Equality Party about their stance on Sharia councils and their treatment of women. The Women's Equality Party replied to say, the Women's Equality Party is a non-partisan political party, and the issue of Sharia councils is a partisan one, so we don't have a party line. I have worked with the crossbench peer and human rights campaigner Baroness Cox against Sharia councils and their treatment of women. I highlighted the Women's Equality Party's shameful position on Sharia councils, and guess what? The Women's Equality Party now opposes Sharia councils and their treatment of women. I am delighted I was able to help them with their policies to help women. And he has lots of exclamation.
Yeah, it's worth saying that because they were given unprecedented kind of media access, weren't they, before the election, and for a party with no kind of sitting what do you call them, candidates or anything. But and they were interviewed at Channel 4, and they said Philip Davies says you don't condemn Sharia councils, and Sophie what's her face went, oh what I do, of course I do. And it's kind of without saying, well, no, our official party line never used to be that, but we have changed our mind on that. It just looked like it was, Did you read the bit about where he said, like, somebody in his constituency said somebody from the Women's Inequalities Party had told one of his constituents that he voted against the Istanbul Convention because he used to beat his wife?
Yes, I saw that.
What,
the article.
Yeah.
That's disgusting. That, Sophie Walker is an incredibly good liar, and I'm not saying that she was the one who said that to his constituent. But, she can't admit. She
wasn't even lying. Yeah, at one point she said Philip Davies advocates for equality on the basis that all people should be treated the same, as if that was a criticism or something. Well, I mean, it is, because it doesn't it's not intersectional and postmodern and all that shite. It's just kind of egalitarian, and of course, that's what feminists are definitely not. So yeah, thanks for being honest, Sophie, just for once. Really appreciated.
Yeah, and I also I think also he is reveling in the fact that the Women's Equality Party said that we want other political parties to steal our policies because they're that good. And so they ended up stealing one from Philip, or at least from him bringing it up, realizing they need to say something about it. So I am quite happy that this has happened, and I say well done, Philip, for telling everyone about how you have helped to shape the Women's Equality Party's policies. If they are to get anywhere, then they will need a policy on the Sharia Council.
Yeah, I think the working title for that article was "The Man Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest." But I stole it from him. As my niece would say, "You stole it."
Yes. So, as you guys know, I never got to go to Shipley, and I never got to make my film, which is such a shame. However, I would like to do some stuff with Sophie Walker in the future, and I'm not entirely sure how that's going to happen, because she's probably going to act like I've never contacted her or spoken to her. She's probably going to act like that we don't exist. So any ideas on how we can get Sophie Walker to talk to us would be...
I've got a little idea.
Yeah, go on.
Why don't you have somebody stand in as Sophie Walker and just have her read Sophie Walker's own words, and you respond to them.
Yeah, I'll do that.
That's not bad.
Can I do an impression?
Blonde wig on.
I'll put a blonde wig on and do an impression of Sophie Walker.
Yeah. But use her exact words because they're incriminating.
Oh, I will.
enough, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You remember
let's
back
do an
in
interview.
the 2008 election when Saturday Night Live, I don't know if you get it over there, used to parody, what's her name there, the crazy woman from Alaska, Sarah Palin. And they would just repeat Sarah Palin's words verbatim. It was hilarious.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm not offending any Sarah Palin fans out there. I'm sure she's a very nice lady.
Hey, she wants smaller government, so I don't mind that.
But you got to admit, she said some pretty boneheaded things back then.
Yeah. All right. Well, what else have we got to talk about before we finish, guys, girls?
We've covered everything on the list here, so it's completely open.
Yeah.
All right. Any other words before you go, Elizabeth?
Oh gosh, I don't think so. Good.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Rock.
Okay.
Dad's rock.
Yes. And uncles.
And uncles, yeah. I sent, for the first time this year, I sent my Uncle Alan a Father's Day card. Dad in my life. I used to go and stay with him every weekend, and he was just the best, and he gave me unconditional love, and I've never properly thanked him for it, so I did this year, and it was a very
that warms my heart.
Good story.
Bye all.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Good night. Thanks everybody for tuning in. And don't forget, next week, same time, 9 o'clock in the morning Eastern time and 2 p.m. London time for a conversation with the Liberty Bells. Good night or good afternoon.
Bye.
Yeah, well, I just want to say before